I paid every bill in our small Dallas apartment while he slept with a gun under his pillow. People call it love. I called it the slow theft of myself. He said the weapon was for protection, but I was the only one beside him at night. Paycheck to paycheck, I kept the lights on and my voice low. Some nights I prayed. Other nights I held my breath until morning. He wasn't always like this. He used to laugh like the world was light. He'd say I calmed the storms that lived behind his eyes. But whispers of panic crept in, and his gaze turned suspicious. He started naming enemies I couldn't see, shadows I couldn't touch. I learned to be quiet when the floorboards groaned. At church they said marriage is holy and endurance is love. I wore endurance like a crown that pressed into my scalp. I smiled through sermons that tasted like iron in my mouth. He stared at nothing, and I stared at him not seeing me. Faith, I discovered, can wrap chains in lace. I worked late shifts and folded my exhaustion into neat stacks. He called it recovery, but from what he never explained. Our fridge held leftovers. Our home held unspoken rules. Do not disturb his sleep, his silence, his secrets. I found myself apologizing for my own heartbeat. Then came the guns. First a pistol, then a heavy revolver. He locked them in drawers like promises he wouldn't keep. He said, "They're guardians," and I wondered who needed guarding. Sleep became a door I dared not close all the way. Every dawn felt borrowed, as if someone else had paid. I met him at a bus stop on a warm Texas afternoon. He paid my fare and grinned like kindness was easy. I was 17 and believed in the soft parts of people. He talked about music, freedom, and escaping small lives. I thought I'd found a road out of my own skin. He called the next morning and the morning after. My mother warned me that quick love burns quickest. I mistook her fear for bitterness and my naivety for faith. He told me I was special, something rare and untouchable. I wanted to be the exception to every sad story. His parents' house felt like a room holding its breath. Bottles tucked away, medicines labeled for sleeplessness and sorrow. His mother smiled like an apology she kept forgetting. His father nodded like a man who learned to survive silence. I told myself families are complicated, not dangerous. He worked odd shifts, then none at all, then promises. I began to track his moods the way sailors track storms. If he laughed, I exhaled. If he paced, I hid my eyes. I didn't know love could have weather alerts. I kept an umbrella in my chest anyway. When he touched my hand, fireworks melted into lullabies. When he touched my mind, lullabies turned into alarms. He said I was safe with him, that he'd protect me. From who? I asked, and the night went very quiet. Love turned its face. I pretended not to notice. We married before my doubts learned to speak aloud. A white dress can disguise a red warning light. He cried at the altar, and everyone called it tender. I called it a flood I didn't know how to survive. The ring was bright. The room was dim. The first month held flowers and soft Sunday mornings. The second brought late nights and locked screens. He started sleeping with the TV on, volume low and heavy. I learned the choreography of making myself small. He learned how easily I forgave. I took double shifts while he searched for himself. He searched in video games, in naps that ate whole days. He searched in silence that punished me for asking. I searched for the man who walked me home. He preferred the one who stayed in bed. He said people were out to get him, neighbors and co-workers. He said the world was loud and my questions louder. I said we needed therapy. He called me dramatic. I said we needed help. He said I needed help. So I went alone, and he called it betrayal. At night, he set the pistol on his nightstand like a prayer. He said, "Now sleep," as if safety could be commanded. I slept in pieces, gathering them each morning like laundry. He dreamed of enemies. I dreamed of exits. We woke to the same ceiling in different skies. Chapter 4. Bodies telling the truth. My body knew before my mouth could admit it. Headaches like alarms, shoulders knotted with unsent letters. I carried groceries and unspoken fears up 3 flights. Neighbors smiled, asked about babies, blessings, futures. I smiled back, careful not to spill any truth. I suggested a budget. He called it a cage. He spent on gadgets while I counted coupons. I learned to make casseroles stretch and hope shrink. He learned the thrill of packages on the doorstep. Our love arrived with no receipt inside. He bought another gun, said this one felt right. He named it after a saint and kissed the barrel. I laughed because I didn't know how to scream yet. The laugh sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Maybe it did. Maybe I was already leaving myself. He started locking his phone with a new passcode. He said it was privacy. I heard it as permission. Late nights, blue light painted his face a colder color. He smiled at messages I couldn't read or unsee. The room turned small. My questions turned smaller. Sunday service told me forgiveness has 7 times 70 doors, but none of them opened for me that week. I tithed my silence and received fresh guilt in return. He gripped my waist too hard during the final hymn. I thanked God for breath and wondered why it hurt. He wanted a baby to fix the air between us. I wanted solid ground, not glue over cracked floors, but his promises sounded like rescue at the time. We tried, and then we waited, and then fear kicked. Her name came first. Grace, a word I needed. Pregnancy taught me the math of surviving in halves. Half sleep, half hope, half love, half goodbye. He swore he'd change before the baby arrived. Change came as a missed shift and a new holster. He said, "A father protects," and bought another gun. I rubbed my belly and rehearsed courage in whispers. I whispered bills, doctors, diapers, and escape plans. He slept late and woke hungry for a different life. He ate hours. I ate worry in small, sharp bites. We both got sick on what we swallowed. Nurses told me to rest, and I nodded politely. Rest is a bridge that collapses under fear. I worked until my ankles swelled like uncried tears. He asked why I was distant. Distance kept me safe. I measured love by the inches I reclaimed. The night she kicked hardest, thunder rolled over Dallas. He cleaned his pistols to the rhythm of the storm. I counted down from 100, then from mercy. The air smelled like metal and rain and decision. I promised my daughter I would learn to choose us. Grace arrived with a cry that sounded like truth. I held her, and suddenly the room had windows. He took photos, then took a nap and missed her first smile. I didn't cry from hormones. I cried from clarity. Love for her rearranged the furniture in my soul. Night feedings were hymns I sang without a choir. He said he needed sleep to job hunt tomorrow. Tomorrows lined up like soldiers who never saluted. He scrolled while I rocked, scrolled while I bled. I learned the art of doing without applause. He started staying up in the living room, whispering. The glow from his phone lit him like a stranger. He laughed softly at messages that weren't mine. I asked who. He asked why I didn't trust him. Because trust needs air, and ours was smoke. I found a receipt for a motel conference. He said it was a mistake, a refund pending. He called me jealous, unwell, ungrateful, un-American. I called my therapist and learned new words. Boundaries, safety. He called them insults. I called them doors. He placed a loaded gun in the nightstand. For peace. Peace left. Dignity packed a small bag and followed. I slept with Grace against my chest, counting heartbeats. He turned his back and turned on a movie. Some endings announce themselves before the plot admits it. I opened his laptop because my hands were braver than my voice. Flirty messages, midnight photos, passwords named after storms. He said it was just online, like the ocean is just water. Screenshots felt like sirens. My mouth filled with salt. Truth burns hot even when it sits still. He swore nothing happened in person. Then a name appeared. A diner off I-35, a Tuesday afternoon. A receipt. He said they only talked. The receipt said 2 hours. He said I was crazy. The tip said otherwise. Gaslighting is a match struck in a closed room. I confronted him while Grace napped, tiny and holy. He leaned on anger like a crutch that kicks back. Called me a snoop, a problem, a woman pushing him away. But I wasn't pushing. I was breaking open. Breaking is how light gets a map to enter. That night he slept with the gun under his pillow again. He said he was protecting us from people who judge. The only judge I feared was my future self. She stood in the doorway, asking why I stayed. I had no answer that didn't taste like fear. I packed a small bag and hid it behind the crib. Birth certificate, spare keys, cash folded like wings. I practiced leaving in my head until it felt possible. The door didn't know it would be chosen soon. But my daughter did. She slept softer that night. The apartment learned my footsteps and kept my secrets. I moved like a nurse in a dark ward, careful not to wake danger. He slept late, the gun a small moon under his pillow. I rehearsed calm in the mirror until my face believed me. Grace watched everything and pretended she didn't. He said job applications took time, like grief does. I said bills took time too, like drowning does. Silence filled the kitchen, heavy as wet coats. Even the faucet dripped on beat with my fear. I counted seconds between drips and made them prayers. His phone lit up like a lighthouse for ships I didn't know. He laughed at messages written in another woman's voice. My name felt misspelled on his tongue that week. I learned to talk to myself in cupboards and closets. Drawers know how to keep quiet when asked. He started cleaning the guns with a devotion I recognized. I used to clean hope like that, polishing for company. He called them my responsibility, like we weren't. Metal on cloth sang a song I never learned. I rocked Grace and matched the rhythm, just to survive. When I asked to see his messages, he said, trust was sacred. When I asked for help, he said patience was sacred. Sacred kept changing names until it meant only him. I nodded because nodding is cheaper than a fight. Some nights I slept. The rest, I memorized exits. He left to look for work and came back smelling unfamiliar. A stranger's perfume is a confession with good timing. He said I was imagining, hormones lingering like ghosts. My body isn't a courtroom, but it knows evidence. The sink held a glass. I held my breath. He took the car for hours and returned with excuses. Traffic, construction, a friend needing help immediately. I traced the map in my head and found no detours. The city isn't that big when you're hiding. He put his phone face down and called it manners. I found a motel loyalty card in his wallet. Points collected for nights I never knew happened. He said it was for work interviews on the outskirts. Interviews don't text at midnight with heart emojis. I swallowed the word liar because our child was listening. At church, the pastor preached about secret sins. He spoke of darkness that loves closed doors. My chest answered back with a drum of panic. I didn't cry. My eyes were already busy staying open. I gripped the pew like a railing on a sinking ship. That night, he set the revolver on the counter to dry. He said rain got inside the holster somehow. Rain doesn't smell like perfume or cigarette sweetness. He kissed my forehead and missed my eyes entirely. I learned that missing is a skill you can practice. Motherhood made me a lighthouse no one could dock at. I glowed. I warned. I saw far. And yet. Grace drank her bottle while I drank my thoughts. He scrolled. A shadow with thumbs for eyes. I wondered if he remembered her middle name. He accused me of spying when I asked about his day. He said men need space, the kind with locked doors. Space expanded until there was no air left for us. Even laughter sounded illegal in our living room. I learned to whisper joy into her tiny ear. I kept formula stocked beside a first aid kit. Bandages for knees, bandages for promises. Same drawer. He kept ammunition in a shoebox beneath the couch. I tripped on it and he barked like I'd broken trust. Trust bleeds quietly, then forgets the wound. He left late for errands and came back with new cologne. Grace stared at him like he spoke a language she forgot. He lifted her once, then checked a notification. Screens have gravity. I cannot compete with planets. He put her down as if she weighed an apology. I told myself to wait for proof made of paper. Proof that doesn't argue when the door is shut. Proof that cannot accuse you of overreacting. I made a folder inside my head for later. I labeled it, when we have to run. A credit card bill slipped under the door like a messenger. 2 restaurants across town, 2 Tuesdays in a row. He said clients. The line item said champagne for 2. Clients don't send selfies at 2:03 a.m. I printed what I could and hid it in a cookbook. He changed his passcode and called it Healthy Boundaries. I changed my plan and called a shelter hotline. The woman's voice was steady as a bridge. She said safety first, then proof, then a bag. I checked them off with my heart in my throat. He looked at me the way men look at locked windows, not as a person, but as a problem to solve. He was charming again, butter soft and Sunday sweet. That's how danger wears its good suit. I smiled back because sharp truths need soft timing. At night, he texted someone good girl and miss your mouth. The words crawled off the screen and bit me awake. I tried to breathe quietly so Grace could dream. I wish peace had a spare room for mothers. I plugged in my phone and charged courage instead. He fell asleep with the gun beneath his palm. I stared until my eyes burned their own halo. I pictured headlines and my mother's hands shaking. Then I pictured us alive in a small, bright kitchen. Hope is a thin blanket, but it warmed me enough. I found a floral dress crumpled in the back seat. Not mine, not my size, not our life's story. He said it was his cousin's, left after a ride. Cousins don't wear perfume that lives for days. Guilt has a scent. It doesn't wash out easy. He called me unstable and promised to prove loyalty. Loyalty doesn't need rehearsal or rehearsal flowers. He planned a date night at a downtown steakhouse. I wore red because bravery needs a color. The wine tasted like a dare I didn't take. In the bathroom, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. She wrote, "He says you're separated, just paperwork." I wrote back a single word. No. Silence through the door felt like an audience. I tucked the phone in my bra like a secret vow. He watched me across the table, a hunter with manners. My hands shook, and I blamed the air conditioning. He said we'd be fine if I stopped making drama. Drama is what truth looks like when it finally stands up. I stood up inside, even while sitting down. On the drive home, he asked if I forgave him. Forgiveness is a bridge I don't cross in the dark. I said I needed time, and he said time is love. He doesn't know time can also be escape. The dress in the back seat kept breathing. I taught myself fire drills without alarms. Keys, wallet, diapers, documents. Grace in my arms. Down the stairs, left at the mailboxes. Don't look back. The parking lot is a mouth. Don't let it chew you. The sun is a witness. Make it remember. He became generous, then cruel, then generous again. Abuse is a pendulum that swears it's a clock. He bought toys for Grace and bullets for himself. He bought flowers for me and silence for the night. I watered the flowers and let the silence die. I put cash in a jar labeled flour. Flour rises, so should we, I wrote in my head. He never baked, never asked, never noticed yeast. Safety sometimes hides in boring words. I learned to love boring with all my might. He wanted to pray together, hands clasped tight. I prayed for truth, and he prayed for obedience. We said amen and meant different gods. Afterward, he checked his messages in the bathroom. Water ran to hide the sound of betrayal. The shelter hotline called me back with resources. They spoke of plans that fit into shoes. I tried the steps in my mind until they didn't slip. Fear is a staircase. Courage is taking one stair. Grace slept. I tucked resolve under her blanket. I followed him once, the way storms follow heat. He drove to a motel near the highway lights. He knocked. A woman opened. My stomach opened wider. I parked far away and named every star, "Don't cry." Tears still found me and did their job anyway. I took photos with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Proof stared back at me through a pixel cage. He kissed her like he'd never learned my mouth. He held her like he forgot our home had doors. He left his gun in the glove box like a promise. I went home first and laid out the evidence. Receipts, screenshots, the dress, the motel sign. I put them on the kitchen table like a map. The word enough finally tasted like food. I chewed and felt my strength return molecule by molecule. He came back humming, the tune I used to love. I pointed to the table and my hands went still. He called me vicious and stormed down the hallway. I didn't follow. I had already arrived at the truth. The truth sat with me and held my spine. He reached under his pillow, then thought better of it. I watched that thought pass like a dark cloud. He slammed the bathroom door and yelled that I was done. He was right, but not the way he meant. The door finally learned my name. Exit. The next morning, silence spread across the apartment like fog. He avoided my eyes, and I avoided his shadow. Grace played quietly, sensing storms she couldn't name. I folded laundry with hands that wanted to pack instead. The word leave sat heavy behind my teeth. He said, "You'll never make it without me." His voice was soft, but it landed like a threat. I thought of the rent receipts with my name alone. I thought of Grace's laugh, proof that joy could live anywhere. And suddenly, his sentence didn't sound like truth. That night, I slept with my shoes by the door. He snored, the gun clicking as he turned. Every breath felt like walking on glass. I waited for dawn the way people wait for miracles. When light came, it felt like forgiveness. He left for work, though he hadn't had a job in months. I took Grace, the folder, the bag, the jar labeled flour. We stepped into the morning, quiet as a prayer. The air outside didn't taste like fear anymore. Freedom has a smell. It's sunlight on new pavement. The shelter was small, painted pale yellow, full of women. Their eyes were mirrors. I saw my reflection healing there. They said my name gently, as if testing its strength. I said it back until it stopped shaking. That day, I started to breathe for real. He found out where I went. His messages came in waves. Promises, apologies, threats, love's ugly cousins. Then silence, the kind that hums before disaster. The police called. He'd been taken to the hospital. A reaction to medication, they said gently. I stood in the hallway, the floor tilting beneath me. Machines beeped. People whispered. Grief rehearsed itself. He looked small, like the boy he once was. For a moment, pity and fear shared a room, but pity is not permission to return. The doctor asked if I was family. I said, not anymore. The words came out steady, a bridge burning quietly. He'd tried to harm himself again, but I couldn't fix him. I had spent too long mistaking rescue for love. This time, I chose survival over sainthood. The nurse said he'd live, and I nodded, relieved. Alive meant far away. Alive meant no ghost to haunt Grace. I left before he woke, the hallway echoing behind me. Freedom doesn't always cheer. It exhales. Outside, the air was cold and kind. In the cab, I held Grace's photo like a compass. She would never remember this hospital, thank God. I promised myself she'd grow up knowing peace, not panic. Some vows you keep, even when they break you. This one, I'd rebuild from my own ribs. Divorce papers are just paper until you sign your name. Then they turn into wings, fragile but real. The courtroom smelled like dust and old stories. He sat across from me, eyes empty as burned-out lamps. I didn't flinch. I had already left in my heart. He asked to speak. I shook my head no. Words were his weapons. I wouldn't reload them. The judge stamped a sound that felt like thunder. It was over. Official. Legal. Irreversible. I felt lighter, and that scared me too. Afterward, I walked to the car and cried for both of us. Cried for the girl who believed she could heal him. Cried for the man who never learned how to love. Cried because peace costs everything you thought you were. Then I drove home and made dinner anyway. Grace hugged me that night and said, "You smile different now." I said, "That's what free looks like, baby." She nodded, like she understood more than I wanted. I tucked her in and sat beside the window. The stars finally looked like a future, not a ceiling. I sent an email to my therapist that said, "I'm ready. Ready to stop surviving and start living. Ready to talk about the woman I buried to stay alive." She replied, "Welcome back." I think that's the kindest thing anyone ever said to me. It's strange how quiet feels dangerous after years of noise. The hum of the fridge startled me. Peace takes practice. Grace drew pictures of sunshine and called them home. I hung each one like armor on the wall. Art therapy, she said proudly. I believed her. I worked part-time, studied at night, learned new names. Anxiety still came to visit but didn't stay for dinner. Sometimes I dreamed of him, standing at the door. But dreams can't unlock dead bolts. I slept with the lamp off for the first time in years. Friends returned like spring, shy but bright. They didn't ask for details, just brought laughter. We cooked pancakes and talked about nothing urgent. The smell of syrup made the air less haunted. Joy has no agenda. It just arrives. I found an old box of letters from him. Once they meant everything. Now they meant history. I read one, smiled sadly, then burned the rest. Ashes floated like dandelions in the wind. Sometimes closure looks like smoke. Therapy taught me my favorite word, boundaries. I built them strong, painted them soft. They weren't walls. They were gardens with gates. Only kindness gets a key now. Grace waters the flowers. I guard the peace. I cut my hair one morning without crying. It fell like chains, silent and final. The mirror didn't recognize me, and that was good. I smiled, not for anyone, just to see if I could. The woman staring back looked alive. I started running at sunrise, lungs learning freedom. Each breath was a page torn from an old book. Neighbors waved. I waved back without apology. The body remembers fear, but it also remembers joy. Every mile, I left a ghost behind. Grace asked if I'd ever love again. I said, "Love isn't a man. It's a mirror." She laughed and said I looked younger. Healing does that. It trades wrinkles for light. We made waffles and called it church. Sometimes, I still check the locks twice. Trauma is a guest that overstays its welcome. But now I know how to show it the door. No shouting, no panic. Just goodbye. Peace doesn't need noise to prove it's real. I kept a journal called Next Time Me. Inside I wrote, "Never shrink to be safe. Never confuse control for care. Never stop choosing yourself." That list is my gospel now. 5 years later, I tell this story not to relive it, but to release it. If you're watching, maybe you've lived in that kind of quiet too. Maybe you've smiled so hard your teeth hurt. Maybe you've prayed for peace that never came. I want you to know, it will. He still exists somewhere, I suppose. But in my world, he's just a name that doesn't echo. Grace is taller now. Her laughter fills every room. Sometimes she asks if I'm happy. I say, yes, because we made it out. I still wear my wedding ring, melted into a small silver bird. It sits on my desk to remind me that freedom flies. Some days I'm lonely, but never empty. Loneliness is space. Emptiness was him. I prefer the space. It lets light in. If you're standing at your own closed door tonight, listen. Your heartbeat is the key. You don't owe anyone your silence. You deserve a life that doesn't make you afraid to breathe. Walk out, even if it's slow, even if it shakes. And if this story found you, stay with us. Subscribe. Share your story. Tell us where you're from. You are not alone. Not now. Not ever again. Every Thursday we speak healing into the dark together, until every woman remembers she was never meant to hide.